Hey folks, Zach Grant here, doing another disability ministry video, trying to get you folks to be the disability ministry people in your churches or communities or whatever. I got really dressed up for the video today, so you're welcome. This video is about why even do disability ministry. So I think the why of it is probably one of those foundational questions, and I guess my advice is this. If your church has like a lot of people with disabilities, then start to think about doing a ministry for those people with disabilities. However, first, make sure that you have a vibrant children, youth, college, young adult, music, adult education, what have you. Make sure all those ministries are going off before you get into disability ministry. Also, make sure that you have new carpets, make sure you have new roofs, new security systems, just ample storage, audiovisual equipment, make sure the church bus is running super tight. And if all that is good, then start to consider one of several niche ministries. Oh, also, if you have homeless people around your church, but never, noticed a great many people with disabilities, think about how it might be better to serve them. Also, maybe missionaries. If you know a lot of struggling missionaries overseas, think about those servants overseas before you start to consider doing a disability ministry. It's really difficult to think about what to do in ministry and about being a good steward of the resources that you have as a church, as a community organizer, what have you. And as long as ministries that are kind of for and with people with disabilities are just one niche ministry in competition with all the various needs of the church, there is always going to be a reason not to do it. Disability ministry, and I think this is my main thesis, is not niche. It's essential. For the sake of the whole church, I hope that you are thinking about getting into it. When people began to realize, and this is my background is in youth ministry, when people began to realize that we couldn't afford not to do youth ministry, that's when we started to resource and allocate ministry to youth ministry. And I think the church needs to have a similar reorientation towards ministry with people with disabilities. I think that we can't afford not to do it. So here are some of the reasons why, which I have shared in writing before, which if you've talked to me at any length, you probably have heard about this, but I've not done a video on it. So, if you've already know me well and know the stuff that I talk about, you can just tune out. But for everybody else, here it goes. So I think the first thing is really just to look to your own self-interest. The reality is that all of us are only temporarily able-bodied. If we're lucky, we will live long enough to experience disability ourselves. The capabilities of our bodies, our minds, through age or accident, they will fail us eventually. And even though our bodies fail, we are still a part of God's body. That doesn't cease when we acquire a disability. Though what we offer, or sometimes even what we need, is the thing that Christ's body needs. The church still incorporates its weakened members. In fact, God's power is made perfect in our weakness, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. It's my conviction that the fact that the church often neglects people born with disabilities leads us to neglect people at large when they're in these parts of their lives where they are or feel weakened. If we aren't going to do a good job of including people with disabilities, then I think that we are in some ways hiding from our own weakness. And thus, we hide from the very power of God. And I think that the church can't afford to do that. Here's another reason. I call it small gospel syndrome. If the gospel doesn't fit a group of people, our gospel is too small. When we can't imagine that a person with severe intellectual disabilities might, have something to offer to our youth group, it means that we don't really understand what's going on in youth group. If we're concerned that a person with disabilities will be a disturbance in worship, then it reveals that we don't really understand what's happening when we gather for worship. If we're afraid to do what the gospel requires because it will cost us what it costs us, then we don't understand the gospel's value, and we've been settling for something cheaper. Families. Families is the next thing. If you don't see the value in having a lot of people with disabilities be a vital part of your congregation, their families do. Please take their word for it, or at least trust that a huge part of your local community will not trust in your wisdom, having seen you get it so terribly wrong with regards to their loved one who happens to have a disability. Okay, if at this point you are not convinced, just send those people with disabilities that are a part of your congregations, that are a part of your communities, send them to mine, because every person with a disability has gifts given to them by God for the mission of the church. People with disabilities are no exception. And if you aren't willing to receive them as the treasure that they are, please just send your talents of gold to my church. The reality is that disability ministry is something that we must be about. It's not an obligation to charity either. We need to be about it because the church can't be all that the church needs to be without it. It's the wise design of God that the gospel life is not one of hard choices over scarce resources. The gospel life is God allowing the scales to fall off of our eyes so that we can see God's abundance just busting forth from what before seemed weak, contemptible, or needy. People with disabilities are not drowning swimmers that will pull us under if we don't have our ship in order. People with disabilities are treasure that the world has cast aside. And it's our folly if we don't pick it up.